factors. We're talking about, did Jesus actually rise from the dead? What does the academic world say about the facts of Jesus' resurrection? Things, folks, have changed. There's a revolution in the last 30, 40 years in the academic world at the highest levels. And Gary knows about it. He's talking about it. And he's talking about the historical facts about Jesus' resurrection that the guys at the top level and at some of the greatest schools, people that call themselves atheist skeptics, will say these historical facts are true. So I want you not to move. I want you to listen to this argument. He calls it the minimal facts argument. Okay? Some of you might be saying, well, listen, John, are you going to talk about this from the Bible? Yeah, because the scholars will use the Bible. They're not saying it's inspired or inerrant. Gary, how would they use the information we're going to talk about today?
They prefer you to use the material from Paul. They'll secondarily use the Gospels, but they want to stay in Paul if they can, because they say, unlike so many of the other books, some of them will say Paul's the only New Testament author we know for sure. So 13 books with his name on it. Well, he wrote at least 7 of those. So they feel like in Paul, they are getting as close back to the sources as they can. Plus, he came from the other side. He was converted. Therefore, when you're converted like that and it's a life change, you're bringing some things to the table that make you a valuable witness. They could tell by just the way the guy talks, he's not interested in misleading or lying or whatever else. He might be wrong, but he's not going to be some kind of ogre out to steal your soul. So they like Paul for a lot of reasons, and they think he's really intelligent. He can put a good argument together.
Another way of saying it, he's the darling of the skeptics.
He is.
He's an intellectual, and they believe he's giving them straight historical information, and they actually accept 7 of these books, all of them, same books, and they say, use these books, he's giving you good information. Now, you have developed a timeline of some of the things that they accept, and I want you to give the people that are joining us for the very first time this week. We're only using 2 passages, basically. 1 Corinthians 15, we're using Galatians chapter 1 and Galatians chapter 2, which were all just one. There was no division. It was all continuous text. And the fact is that I would like for you to present to them how we get to 1 Corinthians 15, how far it was from the cross when Jesus was crucified and the resurrection, how we get to the events he's talking about there, and then how we bring the events, how the scholars in the world will accept bringing back the information that Jesus appeared to the 12, to over 500 people at one time, to James, to Paul himself, going right straight back to the events, Paul 2 years from the cross, and Peter and James right after the resurrection, okay? How did skeptics accept this data? Give us your timeline.
Well, if we start again with the crucifixion, what we said was Paul comes on the scene at about +2 or 3. 3 years later, he goes to Jerusalem. But in the meantime, a few years later, he was already preaching the gospel, and he settles down to write 1 Corinthians. 53, 55 AD, somewhere, if you're going to put the cross at 33, for example, somewhere between 18 and 25 years. I mean, and again, I emphasized how many of us are sure of things that happened in our life at more than 25 years. I mean, this is a good, close, we're not asking somebody to talk about Alexander plus 400 years. We're down to this. But Paul wrote it here. He writes, he was there with them just 4 years earlier, but he went to Jerusalem at about +5, +6. Now, oftentimes critics stop here and they go, hey, the material's within 5 years, good enough for me. But I'm thinking, don't stop there. I know you're prone to stop there. I want to say to them, I know you're prone to stop there because Paul's your darling and you got the material from him at +5. But we can beat +5. If early is good, and early is one of my minimal facts. He was proclaimed very early. People will say to me, they'll criticize us and they'll say, come on, eyewitnesses can be wrong. And even early sources can be wrong. And I'll say, okay, let's think about what you're saying. There's a reason our law courts are based on early and eyewitness testimony. I know they can be wrong, but because early eyewitnesses could be wrong, what do you want? Do you want late Non-eyewitnesses, maybe they're better, right? Maybe Plutarch's better on Alexandra plus 400. Come on, early eyewitnesses is the best you're going to get. So if the best is what we have, don't complain.
Yeah, what you're saying is the sources about what Alexander said and did are 400 years after he lived, okay?
Actually up to 450. So
yeah, and some historians have no problem with that. There's a 400-year gap between the time the guy died and the fact is when they're writing about him, and you're saying, you know, didn't something creep in during the 400 years? But if you're accepting that, you shouldn't have a problem with Paul here at, 25, and we're getting back down here to 5 years after the events?
Right.
Wow.
And they'll say, yeah, but you're reporting miracles. Miracles are in all the Greco-Roman histories. And then they'll say, well, but that's the point. They're histories. And you'll say, well, do you know what the latest material since about 1990? Richard Burridge, his doctoral dissertation, a classic scholar at University of London, does a dissertation where he does comparison of Greco-Roman biographies to the Gospels. And right now, the fact that the Gospels are Greco-Roman biography is the leading conclusion. So they're the same genre. Yeah, but that's still Christian, and they're still, oh, wait a minute. So the Romans didn't have a religion, right? So when Suetonius writes his 12 Caesars, and in the table of contents, a half of them it says, later deified, later deified, later deified. No religion there. That's just straight history. I mean, we all have religious thoughts, and it's ingrained in us. And they go, well, you still have miracles. I say, well, have you heard about any of the reports today of investigative reporters about some miracle claims today? Maybe we're wrong for not putting histories in our account. And according to Craig Keener, in the Western world, the Western intellectuals are about the only ones who don't work miracles in. The rest of the world, he calls it the greater world, does work miracles in. So maybe the New Testament's right.